Wall Street is rattled this afternoon, and it is not on weak fundamentals, but because President Trump continues to turn up the heat on Greenland. It's that saying, make a deal or pay. Welcome to the Big Money Show. I'm Taylor Riggs, along with my co-host, Dagan McDowell, Brenberg, Jackie DeAngelis, and with us for the hour, Fox Business contributor, Jonathan Hoenig. Great to see you.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
All right.
So the president heading over to Davos, Switzerland for the World Economic Forum, and making things uncomfortable might be the point. Trump announcing 10% tariffs on 8 European nations starting in February. He says it's time for America to combat Chinese and Russian threats in the Arctic after years of inaction. It is a crucial few days ahead, and investors are watching. Jonathan, we know you're watching. I want to talk about tariffs in Greenland, and then let's get to the markets.
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm watching the markets, and the markets don't like it. They don't like what they're hearing. At least that's what's evident from the early going here. And it's not too surprising. I mean, basically, the president is talking about increasing taxes. These tariffs are paid by Americans, and increasing uncertainty. And look, last year during the Liberation Day, you saw the NASDAQ fall 11% in just 2 days. So there's a lot of uncertainty about Greenland. And the irony is that, as I understand it at least, under a 2004 accord, the U.S. can put as many bases and as many troops on Greenland as they want. So what really is the president's strategy here? The market seems to be voting down, at least at this point.
Quickly, from the market's perspective, though, in Liberation Day, a lot of people said that was a great buying opportunity.
Yeah.
It didn't hold. Those losses didn't stick. The Sell America trade was totally overblown. Is this the same case?
Well, interestingly, I mean, the market finally started coming back after Liberation Day, once many of those tariffs started to be rescinded and taken back. And in fact, last year, just saying, the U.S. underperformed international markets by somewhere on the order of 10%. So, look, given the severity and the size of these tariffs, not just the 25% on Europe, I'm talking about the 200% on champagne, a lot of investors and American investors at least sitting on their hands at this point.
Okay, Jackie, I hear champagne and I raise you one. I played this soundbite from Emmanuel Macron.
Oh, did he say that? Well, nobody wants him because he's going to be out of office very soon. So, you know, that's all right. What I'll do is, if they feel like Costo, I'll put a 200% tariff on his wines and champagnes, and he'll join. But he doesn't have to join. If he said that, you're probably giving it to me a little bit differently. But if he actually did say that, but as you know, he's going to be out of office in a few months.
All right, Jackie, my bad. That was Trump. But speaking about the French president, Emmanuel Macron, on those tariffs on champagne, and this is different. This wasn't Greenland. This was to get him on the board of peace. And we're talking about Gaza and the Mideast. But again, this highlights sort of tariffs, the threat of tariffs, the negotiating tool. What do you think?
Well, on the Greenland aspect, there was a text message that Trump released between him and the French president that I found particularly funny. And he said, you know, called him his friend. And then he just said a few other things and said, I really don't understand what you're doing on Greenland. So they, you know, a lot of the European nations, and France included, not a huge fan of this. But again, anytime you want to change something and change it big, we could sit here and we can talk about it for 50 years. We can kick it around, but to change it is a hard thing to do, and it takes courage. And this is something that the president wants to do in our national security interests. Listen, I get it on the tariff issue and the markets reacting in the way that they're reacting. I would also say, you know, a lot of Americans, many of the tariffs were rescinded, but not all of them. So either they have made choices to pay more for things, or try to find what they need here in America and find a different option for it. You don't have to buy foreign goods to survive. So I think that he's playing hardball, but I think he's in a really powerful, dominant position as he goes into Davos. I think that we were questioning the timing a little bit yesterday, and I'm thinking to myself, it's got to be before the midterms, just in case. Anything serious, anything big that he wants to do, he's on a win streak, and he's got the wind at his back right now, so this is a good time to do it. Do I think he is asking for more than he might necessarily want and that he is willing to back off to something, of course, that is the art of the Trump deal. We've seen it many times before. So when I woke up this morning, it was very, very pitch black out, and the futures were down. Dow futures were down about 800 points. And I said, OK, here we go again. Here we are. We've recovered to 526 on the Dow lower. And I just think that, you know, this is what markets do. We've seen this time and time again.
Dagan, I'm hoping that you're going to talk to me about bond yields.
Yeah.
Because what concerns me...
I just started looking them up as soon as you went to Dagan. I'm like, oh, my gosh, I got to figure out where the 10-year is right now.
Yeah.
So they are up.
The worry is this isn't risk off, sell equities, buy bonds. This is sell treasuries and equities. And the 30-year yield pre-2008 was above 5%, and we're at a 4.89. What concerns you about this? And then I don't want to get the nitty-gritties of what Japan bond yields did overnight is wild. I think they were up 27 basis points. They're like at a record high. But there's sort of all these ripple effects as we think about the globe.
Well, Japan, just broadly speaking, shows you how quickly lenders can turn on you. And when they turn, when do they come back? Because Japan's certainly inflation is low there, that they are not reckless, but investors can say, we don't want to own your debt anymore. And you can equate it to that short-lived prime minister in Great Britain. And this is an issue of spending versus revenue, to just break it down, what's going on in our treasury market. Yeah, the 10-year yield is not up that much, but Friday it did close above 4.2% for the first time since September of last year. So that was the highest since September 2nd of last year. So why is that? I just think about Greenland. The White House has thrown out, oh, we could buy Greenland for $700 billion. Well, that's what the U.S. currently at the December run rate for our interest on the national debt. That's what we pay in interest based on last month in 4.5 months. So we could buy Greenland a few times over every year just in what we're paying on our national debt. That is how royally screwed we are. And even if we don't buy Greenland, what kind of spending is the president talking about on defense? Well, he's proposed a $1.5 trillion increase, or a 66% jump, or it's a budget of $1.5 trillion for defense. It's a 66% jump from 2026 spending levels just for defense. So even if we did buy Greenland and the goal is to build out our military bases, this is a financial commitment. While maybe investors are waking up to the fact that that $250 billion that we are getting from some tariff revenue might go poof when we get a decision from the Supreme Court. So none of this makes sense. Also, as the show rolls on, I'll get into some things that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said to Maria about taking government ownership stakes in Intel. And Maria specifically asked him about this and other companies. He said it's an issue of national defense. Okay, well, by saying that, what industry in this country could you not make that argument for? Because that's what the Democrats are going to do. They're going to start taking stakes in every single technology company. If these Republicans and this Trump administration doesn't start heading the other way toward privatization, which is what they promised, but they're not reprivatizing the economy if you're taking government ownership of private businesses.
And to the president's credit, and he has talked about national defense as the impetus for his interest in Greenland. But there's like a schism between what he's saying. I mean, look, we have more ICE agents in Minneapolis than there are U.S. servicemen in Greenland right now. There's less than 200 servicemen in Greenland, and in the administration's national security strategy published 3 months ago, they didn't mention Greenland once. So, look, is this because of the Nobel snub, or is this actually because of a national defense issue for America? I think that's what the bond market and many investors are wondering today.
Well, I think it's national defense. Russia and China are increasingly dominating that part of the world, the Arctic. And they're not doing it because they're fishing, okay? So there's a huge national security issue there. Here's what I like. There's a lot of stuff. I'm with you guys. A lot of stuff I don't like here. But Davos. What do they normally talk about at Davos?
Climate change.
Climate change. ESG. Equity. You pick your woke stuff, okay? What are they going to be talking about at Davos this time?
Economics.
Well, they're going to be talking about
Greenland.
economics, but they're going to be talking about who's patrolling the Arctic and what do they want to do and how many missiles could they send overhead. Guess what? That's a win for America. Trump already goes there having completely set the agenda for what's going to be talked about at Davos. And I would argue, yes, the tariffs are a big threat, okay? He's talking big, it's rattling markets. But what he's done is he's shifted the conversation on Greenland from here, where it's been for 100 years, to here. To your point, Jackie, maybe he's okay coming back here, right? But all I'm saying is he's not waiting around for Denmark to go toe-to-toe with China and Russia when they decide they want to fully dominate the Arctic. And I think that's a win for the world. Denmark's been a great ally. They cannot go toe-to-toe with Russia and China, and neither can NATO without the U.S. If things go down in, north of Greenland, it's going to be the U.S. that has to show up. So all I'm saying here is you may not love how he's having the conversation, but he has changed the conversation to the place it needs to be, and now it's going to happen.
I don't know. Let's put bases on Greenland. Let's put service people on Greenland. Let's show Russia, which, by the way, was invited to be on the board of peace, as I understand it, in Gaza. Let's show Russia that we mean business.
Well, that's what he's doing, Jonathan. This is the art of the deal. You start big with, I want to buy Greenland for the United States, and this is I said this yesterday, first salvo to negotiate with Denmark to get more bases and troops on Greenland beyond the Space Force base that has like a couple hundred people on it. But it's still going to be costly, and that's what I was talking about with the markets.
Right.